I thought I would start actually with a Zoom tip that I learned this last week, and I'm not sure if anybody else knows it, but if you ever need to unmute yourself, one of the fastest ways to do it is just to press and hold your space bar down, and that'll release the mute for as long as you actually have your space bar pressed down. Can you see my screen? Okay, great. So today we're going to be talking about strategies for supporting new learning routines and positive behaviors. Amber already basically went over the agenda, and so I'll just move forward to disclosures. I have no disclosures or conflicts to report at this time. And I know that some of you may not have been able to participate in the first two echoes, but also I think it's a good idea for us to review a little bit of some of the previous concepts that we've covered in the didactics. Week one, Amber shared with us some information about coaching families during distance education, and really the importance of partnering with our families during this time. Different than consulting with them, we're really kind of trying to figure out ways of walking alongside of them and supporting them with their child's needs and their goals, but in a way that really takes into account the current situation of the families. And we know that a lot of our families have other kids that they're trying to support their educational programs through distance education. Many of them are still working or trying to work while at home. Also doing distance education. Many of them have multiple children with disabilities, and so trying to figure out, how to do everything for everyone during this time can be really difficult. So the goal of coaching is really to support the families in learning how to support their children, and doing it in a way that's not directive, but really a lot more collaborative. So Amber shared not only a model for providing coaching, but also some strategies, the ACE strategies of creating alliance, collaboration, and empowerment. Last week, Anne shared some information about how to embed student goals and IEP goals throughout the day using the activity matrix, which is a tool for being able to identify with the family what their sort of natural schedule is, and when they're able to fit IEP goals into, first off, naturally occurring routines, because naturalistic interventions are a really great way to support learning, but also if they're able to fit in more structured academic time, when during the family schedule and routine that might work. And that's a really important thing that we need to consider. Even though our typical schedule might be math at 9 and reading at 10, that may not be what works for the family in their home. So the IEP infusion matrix or activity matrix helps us to be able to collaborate with the family on when they can embed these routines and these activities in their day, and still work with their child to be able to make progress. And also reviewed with everyone visual schedules and the different types and how they work and why they're important. And also presented the idea that we may not be able to just transfer the exact schedule or the exact type of schedule that has worked in a traditional classroom into the home, and that we may need to work with families on different types of schedules to be able to fit their needs in the home situation. So today we're going to build on that collaborative coaching model and the use of the infusion matrix by looking at strategies for supporting new learning routines and positive behaviors. And these will include looking at how to provide structure and some visual supports in the home setting, and methods for gaining and keeping the child's attention, including things like choice and high interest materials, the use of choice boards, the use of first then visual supports, and the use of strategies like timers and countdowns to help with transitions. So we're going to start by talking about visual and physical structure and boundaries. And this is part of the visual supports evidence-based practice. But visual and physical structure and boundaries are a specific type of visual support where we use things like furniture and labels and color coding to help make a space or an activity more visually clear to the student or the learner. So I want to actually launch our first poll by asking you guys, in your typical sort of brick and mortar classrooms or your typical situation of working with students, how many of you have used different kinds of visual and physical structure to be able to support your students? And then second question, how many of you have used structured work systems in your programs or classrooms? So I'm going to give you a couple minutes here to answer the question, and then I'll show the results. Okay, looks like most of you are finished. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Whoop, got a couple more still responding. All right, I'll end the poll and share the results. So it looks like the majority of you have already realized and recognized the benefits of using physical and visual structure when you're supporting students with autism. And that's no surprise to me or to any of us, because we have a pretty experienced group here with us. So our big task now then is to take what you guys already know about visual and physical structure and work systems and help the families to be able to figure out how they can support them in the home. So I have a resource for you, and it's a video that basically is a demonstration program that sort of models how visual supports can be set up in the home environment. And it's called the Autism House, and it's actually, I put it in the box folder for you. So if you wanted to use it to be able to show families what it could look like in the home to set up visual supports and physical structure, it's available to you. We're gonna watch it really quickly here together, not because you guys need to necessarily learn about physical structure or visual supports, but it can sometimes be helpful to see what they might look like when they're set up in the home environment.
My name is Erin Diefendorf, and I'm one of the autism consultants for the Hamilton-Boone-Madison Special Services Cooperative. Today I'm going to show you some visual supports that can be used in the dining room area. As we know, the dining room area can be used for more than one thing. We eat our meals in the dining room, breakfast room area, but also many children do their homework in this area. So we're going to focus on the homework component first. At the table, we have a laptop set up. Many of our students have difficulty with handwriting, and so frequently they like to do most of their work on a computer. So we would leave the computer here available. When the student is not to be using the computer, we could use the no computer sign and then flip it to the back when it's acceptable for them to be using that. We also have a book here that has a bookmark in it, which is really a helpful tool for our students because it actually tells them what page to begin on and what page they are to stop on. One of the things that we try to focus on with many of our students with autism is to try to help them become as independent as possible. So the homework area should be set up so that they can work as independently as possible. This is what we refer to as our trifold, our stoplight trifold, red, yellow, and green. When the student has it placed in this direction, it says I'm working fine. If they're having a little difficulty, I need help, but I can keep working. When it turns to red, I need help and I cannot keep working. So the student can flip this around so that they can indicate to whoever is supervising that area if they're needing some additional assistance. This is also another little I need whatever. It might be I need more supplies, I need help, I need a snack, something that the student could fill in as they're completing their homework. On this bulletin board, we have a variety of different supports that would help a student become organized and to know exactly the procedure that they're supposed to complete. With some of our younger students, we'll use the actual numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. I need to go through my papers with my parent. I need to do my work, take a break, and then my work is finished. Here's another example. Open the folder, write your name, do worksheet, have an adult check, put in folder, put folder in backpack. As you can see, we have a green and a red folder. When the homework is to be done, we put it into the green folder, and then when it's completed, we put it into the red folder so that it will be returned to school. Frequently, our parents will tell us, well, he did his homework last night, but it never gets turned in. So having a procedure of putting it into a finished folder and making sure that that returns to the backpack so that it will be turned in the next day is a very helpful strategy. We also have a few other things here, a multiplication table. We have an ABC chart. We have the script letters. We could have a number line. We have another procedure where the student actually knows my homework's in the red folder, or I've got my homework completed. I think that was at the end. He's putting it in his backpack. I had this backwards a little bit. Do your worksheet. Have an adult check. Put in the folder. And make sure the folder gets in the backpack. We also have a container here where we keep our supplies. It's important for the student to have all of the necessary supplies, whether it be pencils, pens, crayons, markers, all of these available in one area so that they do not have to go around the house to secure those. When they do, they're easily distracted, and it's been very difficult to get them back and focused on their work. This is also a nice little instrument for communicating with the school as to what happened the evening before at home. For dinner, what I had to eat, what I watched on television, if we had any company, what I played with, if we went out somewhere, and I went to bed at what time. It's very important to have good home-to-school and school-to-home communication. Oftentimes, homework can be a very frustrating time, so we have a little chart over here that helps a student on the 5-point scale again know exactly where they are in terms of their anxiety level. And number 1 would be, I'm doing my homework, I'm calm, things are going well. All the way up to number 3, I'm stopping working, I can't work without help, I need to get help from an adult. All the way up to 5, where I'm throwing a tantrum and I really, really need to leave this area and go somewhere to calm down. We do have some materials here for a calming space, a pillow, a blanket. Some of our students have very strong sensory needs, and sometimes to help calm, they need to have an area where they can go and have a quiet space and have some of their favorite fidget toys, a squeezy toy, something to help them relax and to calm down. My name is...
There we go. So obviously we're not going to ask you to ask your parents to set up a special bulletin board in their kitchen with all of the child's visual supports. I think that was just more to demonstrate what the variety of different visual supports could be. But having a designated space in the family home where structured work will take place can be a really important way of being able to help a student know what's expected when they go to that area. It might be that the family's able to set up a little office area or a workstation at their home. The dining room table is just fine, so long as there are the needed and necessary materials that are there and available when it is time to do work. And I think that's a really important part of what we're trying to convey to the parents is if you're using a space that serves multiple functions and purposes, it's important that you clarify for the student what's expected when you send them there. So things like a privacy shield, things like a little visual support that says work time, or setting it up uniquely for homework or schoolwork when it's time for homework or schoolwork so that it looks dramatically different than when it's mealtime. That can really help to clarify for the young person exactly what's expected of them. So setting up a workstation and talking to the family and really collaborating with them, what that looks like in their home and how it's working, and what you might be able to do to help to fine tune and support that is definitely one thing that you want to talk to the families about. Structured work systems can also be really helpful if you have a child that's doing more kind of academic work. And you saw a couple of examples, the red folder, green folder on the video. Here are a couple of more examples of work systems. On the top right, we have the bins with the to-do work on the left and the finished work on the right. So the idea is that the student would know what work they needed to do, because that's in the to-do side, how much work, so it's the number of pages or the number of packets that are in there, They would know what to do when it's finished, put it in the finished bin, and then their schedule would indicate to them when everything is finished, what happens next. The bottom right is really similar. It's a binder with to-do work on the left, and then once they finish it, they put it on the right. And then a checklist can also be a type of work system. If you have a student who is more of a reader and likes to check things off when they're finished, the homework checklist is a type of work system as well. So you guys know the value of these things clearly because all of you are using them. You know that work systems and visual and physical structure can help to eliminate and minimize distractions. It can clarify what is expected of the learner at any given time. It can help to reduce anxiety and can teach some really important self-management strategies. So our job then is to really help to support the families in learning how to use these in the home. So brainstorming ways to set up or refine a workstation, working with the family to identify items that are needed by the child, and this may include even just pens and pencils that they may not have easily accessible, and figuring out ways of being able to get them what they need. It could also be specialized learning supports and visual supports that that could be helpful to the child and that you've seen work really well with the child in traditional school. Collaborating with them to create work systems that are appropriate for their child, and also then empowering families with how to set up that much needed structure so that they can realize the results of that. So I'm going to launch the second survey now. And this one really asks you all to identify if you have used any kind of countdown or warning systems with your students in your traditional brick and mortar classrooms. So the first one is the use of visual countdown strips, and the second one is the use of visual timers. So if you could identify which ones you guys have used. Give you a couple more seconds to finish up. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like the majority of you, 90%, have some experience and have had some success using visual timers, but that only about 10% of you are familiar with or have used visual countdown strips. So I am going to go over both methods with you just as a review, and I have a resource also that is in the folder for where you can find some information about visual timers and countdown methods.
And Patty, really quickly too, just others shared in the chat, and I apologize. Several people did use both, but they'd only allowed them to choose one.
Oh,
The other. So I think it's a little higher on both of them.
Okay, good, thank you. Malfunction. All right, so countdown methods can include countdown strips, and here are a couple of different examples of a countdown strip. Just a way of basically making it really visual and concrete when a particular activity is going to be finished. So it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys use this with your kids or if it was used on you when you were a child, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it's over. Same idea here, but rather than it just being verbal and fleeting or the use of fingers, the one on the left is numbers. So the number is put on as the countdown is happening until you reach the last icon, which in this case is all done, and that would signal a transition. The method on the right is very similar, but rather than using numbers, it's using color like a stop sign. So green means that you can still go, a yellow means that it's almost over, and a red means it's time to finish and you move on to the next activity. So these can be really helpful in supporting transitions. As it sounds like most of you already know, as well as timers can be incredibly helpful with supporting transitions. And there are so many different varieties out there. The one that probably is most commonly known and used is the time timer, which is in the middle there with the red. It shows the passage of time. When the red disappears and is completely gone, that means the time is up. They do have an app version of this as well. So that's something that if the family has an iPhone or an iPad, can easily be accessed and used. A sand timer is a really concrete method of being able to show the passage of time. And then you have a variety of different others. The resource that I provided for you is actually a blog written by a parent who reviewed 20 visual timers for children with special needs. So that's a great resource to be able to go to. You know, a lot of kids can just respond to a typical kitchen timer as well. So, you know, it's really a matter of just working with families to come up with a method that works for them, that they have accessible to them, and that can be helpful when having to do some of those transitions. So you guys know this, countdown methods can be really helpful because they visually indicate how long an activity will last. And this can include a preferred activity and a non-preferred activity. They can help to remove the power struggle that sometimes goes on whenever a transition is needed, because it isn't mom that said so, it's the timer that said so. And it can teach students a really important self-management skill. So how do we support families in being able to use countdown timers? Well, again, partnering with families to identify a type of timer or visual countdown method to use. And you can really draw on your experience with that child to be able to support this, what's worked for you in the classroom or in the past. Collaboratively identify situations where a timer or countdown method might be useful. And I'm sure that there's a lot of them going on in the home right now, especially with just beginning some of the online and home-based instruction. Ending a preferred activity and moving to a less preferred activity. That can be a time that parents really struggle and need a lot of support, and this might be a method that you could support them in using. And then coaching and empowering the parents or the support providers to use the method during home routines and during home instruction. All right, third and final poll. I'm gonna launch this one. And this one has lots of questions on it, so hopefully it doesn't malfunction. Hopefully you're able to answer all that apply. We want to know which of the following have you used in your classroom to help with gaining and keeping students' attention and engagement. So I'm going to launch this, and the first one is embedding learner preferences into assignments, offering choices between and within activities, reviewing and posting visual rules or expectations, using choice boards, and using first then visual supports. Give you a couple more seconds to respond. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. All right, so awesome. You guys are our pros. So we all know that these are methods that really help to support students with autism, not just students with autism, really all students in being able to actively engage and pay attention to the work that we're presenting them. But again, our task is now to figure out how do we transition these into the home to support families. So I'm going to go through and review some of these and then share some ideas for supporting families. These are all strategies for gaining and keeping attention. Choosing motivating activities and materials, using visual supports to set the expectation, offering choices, and building the student's tolerance to the teaching activity. And I think, you know, choosing motivating activities and materials could be a challenge for a family in the home because they may not have access to all the lovely educational resources and materials that we have. But that's something that we can do to help to support them. And it may be that embedding some of the IEP goals within naturally occurring routines could make it a lot more motivating and meaningful. So counting the number of bubbles that they pop, way more fun than counting the little bears, the little manipulative bears in the classroom, but super meaningful and super motivating and super engaging. Using visual supports to set the expectations. I'm going to show you some example of that, as well as offering choices. But I think one of the important things to really keep in mind and work with families on is building the students' tolerance to the teaching activity. And the tolerance that they had for the teaching activity at school may be way different than the tolerance that they have for the teaching activity at home. So if you're sending home things for the families to do, that you know the student really likes and was engaged in school, don't be surprised if the parent comes back and says, yeah, they don't want to do it. It's a change. This doesn't happen at home. Why are you asking me to do this file folder activity at home, even though it seems to be one of the child's favorite matching games at school? So building the tolerance to the teaching activity is something that, that we have to be really flexible with and work with families around. And really it's quality rather than quantity that we're looking for, especially in the beginning, to be able to set everyone up for success. So these are a couple of different examples of using learner preferences within activities, identifying something that the child's really interested in and basically planning the activity around that. And if you have kids that, that you're supporting that might also be doing grade level academics, or maybe fully included and you're consulting with and working with the gen ed teacher, you know, sometimes this is a really appropriate accommodation to whatever the writing assignment is, letting them write about something that they're interested in or prefer rather than the prompt that's given. So those are some things that you can do. Choices, choices, choices. Clearly you guys know the value of providing choices. But our families may not, or they may be at a loss a little bit about what kind of choices they can be giving. It could be, which worksheet do you want to do? It could be, you know, which order of things do you want to do? But you guys know that even sometimes just the color of paper that the child writes on, or the color of the pen or pencil or whiteboard or paper, or sitting or standing, those are all choices that can really help to engage and empower our students. And so helping families really think about what those choices might be can be incredibly helpful. Visual rules and expectations. You saw an example of this on the video as well, with the keychain that had the expectations of doing work. And here are a couple of more examples. You might have had some of these in place in the classroom, but the task then becomes, how do you adapt those and how do you make them home appropriate so that the family can use them? And it may be that you have to do some material preparation. And a lot of folks have been sharing with us that this is one of the tasks that they're having the paraeducators do. So paraeducators are usually pretty good at making visual supports. They've done it a lot for the classroom, and might now have some time to be able to support making visual supports for the home. If you're coming from a PBIS school site, there's some great resources that PBIS.org has developed for home-based instruction. And one of those is taking the learning expectations or the behavior expectations and transition them into what they look like in home and during distance education. So this resource is also in the box for you all. So if you're on a PBIS campus, if the students that you're working with are already really familiar with this format and the rules and expectations, they have some great resources for you also. So choice sports. On the right is sort of your traditional kind of choice board that we think about oftentimes when we're thinking about supporting students with autism. A lot of times the choice board have the things that they're working for or the things that they get to do after they complete the difficult task. But don't forget that choice boards can actually be used for academics as well. On the left-hand side is an example of a assignment choice board that was created for a high school level student. And basically it has embedded in it multiple different assignments that the students can select from in order to meet the requirement for that particular week or that particular learning unit. So that's a great way to be able to embed choice. It's also a really core feature of Universal Design for Learning to have opportunities for students to select the way that they would like to demonstrate their knowledge and the way that they would like to be able to learn different topics. So if you're on a UDL campus, or if you're consulting or working with a teacher who really understands UDL, creating assignment choice boards can be a great way of being able to embed this practice. Amber shared during the first week some of the Affirm resources from parent implemented interventions. And so I just wanted to remind you guys that this reinforcer checklist is a great tool for being able to help prepare for choice boards in the home. And also the next strategy, we'll talk about the first then strategy. Being able to know what's available and what the student really enjoys doing while they're at home can help to be able to guide what pictures or icons that you use or make accessible. And also, don't forget that a lot of these strategies don't have to be, you know, your traditional Velcro icon strategies. A lot of them can be done on the iPad or on the iPhone, or whatever technology the parent has available. These can be created and made accessible through technology as well. So then I think probably one of all of our all-time favorite strategies, because this is such a go-to whenever you're having a difficult time, getting a student to engage or you know, be motivated to complete work, is the first then strategy. So it's a visual support based on the PREMAC principle of first do the less likely thing in order to gain access to the more likely thing. So first do work, and then you can gain access to something preferred, like in this case, the computer. And this can augment and supplement any other visual support that we've talked about. It can be you know, an augmentation to the full day or part day visual schedule if your family's using a schedule or a work system. But you guys know the power of this, to be able to just visually remind the students so that they can stay engaged and regulated and calm enough to finish a less preferred activity so that they can gain access to a more preferred activity. So lots and lots of strategies that we've talked about today. How do we support families with using this list of strategies? So be flexible with the assignments that you give. And really, you know, it's quality, not quantity, that we're going for. Collaborate with the gen ed teachers to develop those UDL choice boards if your child is engaged in accessing the gen ed curriculum. Offer to make and send icons or photos home to parents for choice boards and first then. Explore with parents how they can use their smartphones or whatever technology they have available to them for things like timers and schedules and first thens. And then, you know, it can always be incredibly helpful, and Amber talked about this during week 1, to observe a lesson and really then empower the parent by providing feedback on how they could improve the lesson by maybe incorporating some of these strategies. And I did want to say, because I know that a lot of times our tendency is to throw every single strategy we know at the parent or at whoever is working with a more challenging child. But we really have to monitor and be measured in how many of these strategies we try to give the parent to do at any one time. So even though we talked about a lot of strategies today, and clearly you guys have a lot of these strategies already in your toolkit, you know, it's really you know, kind of picking the one or two that we think are going to get the biggest effect so that the parent feels confident and comfortable being able to move forward. And, you know, 1 or 2 a week is more than probably anyone can manage or handle at a time. So I just want to encourage you guys to really be conscious of how much we're asking the families to do, to really ease into a lot of the work, but also a lot of these strategies, and encouraging them to try for a period of time, because you all know sometimes these don't work the first time. Sometimes they have to be exposed a few times in order to really gain their desired impact. So encouraging your family to continue working with the 1 or 2 strategies that you've given them for a period of time until you're able to check in with them again. So everything that I shared with you guys today is based on these 2 evidence-based practices, visual supports and antecedent-based interventions. And there are affirm modules on each of these. I also uploaded the brief packet of printable resources on these 2 evidence-based practices into the box. So all of the print materials are there for you, but they do both have affirm modules for further learning on each of them. And then the other resources that I have listed in there, the first one from Hands in Autism is a step-by-step guide for how you use various visual supports, the PBIS resources for the home. And then I have 3 different really short parent-friendly videos explaining first then, explaining the countdown strategy, and one on explaining choice boards. So that is all I have for you today, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.